Hello everybody. Welcome to another audiobook stream. Another late night one, but I think pretty much all of my streams are late night. Hope everybody's week is going well. Mine's been strange so far. Several things I have to figure out. Work and life. But it could be a lot worse. Alright, I was going to change. Remembered what I had initially planned. And thank you to everybody who came to my last couple of streams. On Sunday, we started Shadows, Price of Our Sins. On Sunday. On Saturday, we played a couple of Halloween-themed short horror games. One in the Game Boy style, one in the PlayStation 1 style. And last Wednesday, we continued Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. Made precious little progress. And last night, I didn't get home till late because the bus system where I live is terrible. But that's not exactly news. So tonight, we're just going to read the next 4 stories in Barry Payne's short story collection, Horror in the Dark, from 1901 or 1902, from the 1900s. And these stories tend to vary in length, so these 4 will be shorter than the first 4. It's surprising how much short stories vary by length in some books. Some authors seem to have them more similar length, others they're all over the place. Yeah. Book comes with built-in bookmark. I still don't use it. And as a reminder, we'll be I'll have text-to-speech turned off because I'll be reading. I'll catch up with chat at the end, and I'll have raids and alerts turned off. Just figure that's going to be better in the long run, since I'm going to turn these into actual audiobooks someday. Currently, they're just up on Twitch, broken down into chapters. Someday, when I have more time, maybe instead of recuperating during vacation, I'll make them into audiobooks. Hey, Thanatos. Welcome in. This is a raid? Well, fortunately, it's a very quiet raid. But how are you doing tonight? You guys, please go check out Thanatos 13. Official. As opposed to the other 13 Thanatos, or Thanatos 13s. What if there were 13 streamers named Thanatos 13? It would get confusing. Oh, you were doing more art post recently. Nice, Thanatos. Let's finish the first 4 stories. At least they have nice large print of the story titles at the top. No different between when the story starts and when it's just telling you what story it is. Like, see? This book has unusual format. Yeah. That's what happens when you buy fancy printed books from across the sea. Yeah, my pleasure, Thanatos. Oh, yeah. Oh, I appreciate you going to want to raid me, Thanatos, and thanks for coming to hang out. And I do hope your stream went well today. Right, so we'd finished The Green Light, and the next one is The Magnet. The Magnet. Subsequent to the inquest on the body of the Reverend Ingram Shallow, who shot himself in the churchyard of St. John's, Ilworthy, Bedfordshire, on the evening of October 14th, the following paper was found at his lodgings in the village, and is here published for the first time. It will be remembered that at the inquest the usual verdict of temporary insanity was returned. Thursday, October 6th. The world is still ringing with the news of the ghastly accident to the Express the night before last. The Times has a column and a half. Nothing else is spoken of in the village. Yesterday afternoon I went over on my bicycle to witness the scene of the accident. Of course, the most horrific traces of it had already been removed. The screams of the injured and dying, and the sight of mangled bodies, about which we read in the papers, would have been too much for me. The upline was already clear, and it was expected the downline would also be clear in the course of a couple of hours. There was a perfect army of men at work, with every kind of ingenious contrivance for removing the heavy obstacles. All along the embankment, fragments of the debris are still strewn. At a distance of at least 40 yards from the point where the accident actually happened, I found, among some wet grass and fern, a part of one of those plates they have up in the carriages, giving the number that the carriage is intended to carry. I have often noticed, when standing in the station, the appearance of strength when locomotives and carriages on the fast trains always have. Yet here one saw all this strength of no avail. The engine and the carriages were broken up just like a child's toys. I do most sincerely hope and believe that it was nobody in Ilworthy who was responsible for the disaster. Whoever it is, I do trust and pray that he may be discovered, and that he may pay with his own life for the lives of those hundreds of his fiendish actions have sent, without a moment of warning, into eternity. Friday, October 7th. The vicar came back with me to breakfast this morning after the early service. After some talk about the accident, I asked him if he intended to touch upon it on Sunday morning. He said that he would if I thought it necessary, but that his sermon was already written, being one of a series on the Gospels for the day, which he prepared some time ago. I said that undoubtedly the accident was a terrible event, and one which had sunk very deeply into the minds of everybody in Ilworthy. It was an event which might give point and weight to many a lesson, and it had been my view that Christianity was a practical religion, and the priest should, whenever possible, bring it to bear upon the events of the day. At the same time I did not insist. It was not for me to instruct him. The contrary was rather the case. He smiled good-temperedly, and said that since I seemed to be so full of the accident, and had taken such an absorbing interest in it, I could probably preach a better sermon on it myself, and I might use that as my subject for Sunday evening. I thanked him, and said that I would do so. I have spent the whole day over this sermon. I do not, like the vicar, read my sermons, but I have written this out in full, and shall commit it to memory. I have given what I think is really a somewhat vivid and impressive picture of the great express rushing at headlong speed to ruin. The obstacle just seen by the driver 1 moment before his engine crashed into it, the sudden darkness of the train through the extinction of the lights, the screams for help, the sight of dead bodies laid out on the embankment. I have worked myself up so much about this sermon that I have only to shut my eyes actually to witness the scene myself. I seem to be standing by the obstruction, and to see the long train crashing down upon me when it is too late to do anything. I hope I am not exciting myself too much about it. It is already past 10, and I think I shall have a cup of hot cocoa quietly and go to bed. I notice that one of the illustrated papers in the reading room has a magnificent full-page illustration of the accident. I have often thought, by the way, of writing a little for the papers myself. I know I have some taste for the work, and I am inclined to think I have some little gift also. The supplement to one's income would be useful. Sunday, October 9th. I have just returned from church, exhausted. I preached over 40 minutes without the least sign of impatience from any of the congregation. No coughing or shuffling of the feet or anything of the kind. In the vestry afterwards, Mr. Johnson, our senior churchwarden, took me aside and told me that it was one of the strongest and most impressive addresses he had ever heard delivered from that pulpit. I hope I did not appear to be unduly pleased at this. One must not think of self in these matters, and I strive against it. I was a little surprised that after this special effort of mine the vicar should have said anything at all. He is not a small-minded man, and I cannot believe him to be actuated by jealousy. He spoke of the accident again, and said in what seemed to be a rather patronizing way that he was afraid I was letting it prey too much on my mind. I tried to be humble, and I think I can submit to a rebuke when it is deserved. But really, this is nonsense. I still picture myself at times the man standing by the obstruction and watching the express coming towards him. But for the awful wickedness of it, it would be, in a way, a magnificent moment. He would have the thought that he, a weak man, could at his will check the rush of a train, hurl it over, twist and break the strong iron as if it were cardboard, and avenge himself on hundreds of people, and then have all the police in the country hunting for him, and in vain. Exhausted though I am afraid that I shall get no sleep tonight until I have been out in the fresh air a little. The church was crowded and oppressively hot. The whole village is asleep, and no one will be any the wiser. I think I will get on my bicycle and ride down again to the place where the accident happened. It is within a quarter of an hour to midnight, and so Sunday is practically over. Besides, there are many very good men who do not consider that cycling on Sunday is wrong. Monday, October 10th. Today I have been beset by a terrible and most extraordinary temptation. I thank God that I have wrestled against it successfully, but the fact that such a temptation could even occur to me appalls me. Tuesday, October 11th. The vicar called this morning. He will take both sermons next Sunday. He said that I looked ill, and that he thought I had been overdoing it, and was in want of a holiday. I think he is right. He is really a very kind man. I shall go away next week. Again, all day long, I have been subject to the same diabolical impulse. I was half tempted to speak to the vicar about it, but shame prevented me. I get but little sleep now at nights, and if I do sleep, I am always haunted by the same dream. I see the lights of the express coming nearer and nearer. Wednesday, October 12th. It is done now. It had to be done, and it was no good to contend against it. I believe that it must have been the will of God that I should do it, for ever since the burden has been lifted from my mind, and I have been quite myself again. Late last night, or rather very early this morning, finding myself unable to sleep, I got up and went out. I did not take my bicycle. I ran all the way to that point on the line that I had always been thinking about. There is a stack of heavy sleepers there. It is at the bottom of a deep cutting, and you can see the train coming for some distance. I knew by the tables that I had not much time to spare. I had got 6 of the heavy sleepers across the rails when I thought I heard it coming, but I was mistaken. I dragged on another, and then I heard the roar. There was no mistake about it. I could see the lights flashing as I saw them in my dream. I am ashamed that I had not the strength of mind to wait until the last moment. I tried to, but I could not. I ran away up the embankment and crossed some fields. I saw some men coming and hid behind a hedge. I knew that detectives were about. I lay there panting and was afraid they would hear me, but they passed on. I got back to my lodgings while it was still dark. Nobody had heard me go out, and nobody heard me come back. That is all right. Since writing the above, I have been to the Wednesday evening service. The vicar was to deliver an address. At the last moment I felt that I wished to preach on this awful accident and the lessons it must have for every one of us. I crossed over to the vicar and asked permission to preach. He refused. I warned him that I intended to preach, and that if he attempted to occupy the pulpit he would do so at his peril. Then I suddenly seemed to see the matter in a different light and apologized to him. However, I wish very much to address the village on the subject, and as I am not allowed to preach in church, I shall call a public meeting on the recreation ground. I must remember to get arrangements made as to the printing and posting of bills tomorrow. The Case of Vincent Pyrwhit. The death of Vincent Pyrwhit, J.P., of Ellerden House, Ellerden, in the county of Buckingham, would in the ordinary way have received no more attention than the death of any other simple country gentleman. The circumstances of his death, however, though now long since forgotten, were sensational, and attracted some notice at the time. It was one of those cases which is easily forgotten within a year, except just in the locality where it occurred. The most sensational circumstances of the case never came before the public at all. I give them here simply and plainly. The physical people may make what they like of them. Pyrwhit himself was a very ordinary country gentleman, a good fellow, but in no way brilliant. He was devoted to his wife, who was some 15 years younger than himself, and remarkably beautiful. She was quite a good woman, but she had her faults. She was fond of admiration, and she was an abominable flirt. She misled men very cleverly, and was then sincerely angry with them for having been misled. Her husband never troubled his head about these flirtations, being assured quite rightly that she was a good woman. He was not jealous. She, on the other hand, was possessed of a jealousy amounting almost to insanity. This might have caused trouble if he had ever provided her with the slightest basis on which her jealousy could work, but he never did. With the exception of his wife, women bored him. I believe she did once or twice try to make a scene for some preposterous reason, which was no reason at all, but nothing serious came of it, and there was never a real quarrel between them. On the death of his wife, after a prolonged illness, Pyrwhit wrote and asked me to come down to Ellerden for the funeral, and to remain at least a few days with him. He would be quite alone, and I was his oldest friend. I hate attending funerals, but I was his oldest friend, and I was, moreover, a distant relation of his wife. I had no choice, and I went down. There were many visitors in the house for the funeral, which took place in the village churchyard, but they left immediately afterwards. The air of heavy gloom which had hung over the house seemed to lift a little. The servants are always very emotional, continued to break down at intervals, noticeably Pyrwhit's man, Williams, but Pyrwhit himself was self-possessed. He spoke of his wife with great affection and regret, but still he could speak of her, and not unsteadily. At dinner he also spoke of one or two other subjects, of politics and of his duties as a magistrate, and of course he made the requisite fuss about his gratitude to me for coming down to Ellerden at that time. After dinner we sat in the library, a room well and expensively furnished, but without the least attempt at taste. There were a few oil paintings on the walls, a presentation portrait of himself, and a landscape or two, all more or less bad, as far as I remember. He had eaten next to nothing at dinner, but he had drunk a good deal. The wine, however, did not seem to have the least effect upon him. I had got the conversation definitely off the subject of his wife when I made a blunder. I noticed an Ericsson's extension standing on his writing table. I said, "I didn't know that telephones had penetrated into the villages yet." "Yes," he said, "I believe they are common enough now. I had that one fitted up during my wife's illness, to communicate with her bedroom on the floor above us on the other side of the house." At that moment the bell of the telephone rang sharply. We both looked at each other. I said with the stupid affectation of calmness one always puts on when one is a little bit frightened, "Probably a servant in that room wishes to speak to you." He got up, walked over to the machine, and swung the green cord towards me. The end of it was loose. "I had it disconnected this morning," he said. "Also, the door of that room is locked, and no one can possibly be in it." He had turned the color of grey blotting paper, and so probably had I. The bell rang again, a prolonged, rattling ring. "Are you going to answer it?" I said. "I am not," he answered firmly. "Then," I said, "I shall answer it myself. It is some stupid trick, a joke not in the best of taste, for which you will probably have to sack one or other of your domestics." "My servants," he answered, "would not have done that. Besides, don't you see it is impossible? The instrument is disconnected." "The bell rang all the same. I shall try it." I picked up the receiver. "Are you there?" I called. The voice which answered me was unmistakably the rather high, staccato voice of Mrs. Pyrwhit. "I want you," it said, "to tell my husband that he will be with me tomorrow." I still listened. Nothing more was said. I repeated, "Are you there?" And still there was no answer. I turned to Pyrwhit. "There is no one there," I said. "Possibly there is thunder in the air, affecting the bell in some mysterious way. There must be some simple explanation, and I'll find it all out tomorrow." He went to bed early that night. All the following day I was with him. We rode together, and I expected an accident every minute, but none happened. All the evening I expected him to turn suddenly faint and ill, but that also did not happen. When at about 10 o'clock he excused himself and said good night, I felt distinctly relieved. He went up to his room and rang for Williams. The rest is, of course, well known. The servant's reason had broken down, possibly the immediate cause being the death of Mrs. Pyrwhit. On entering his master's room, without the least hesitation, he raised a loaded revolver which he carried in his hand, and shot Pyrwhit through the heart. I believe the case is mentioned in some of the textbooks on homicidal mania. The bottom of the gulf. 362 years before Christ, a chasm opened in the Roman fountain, and the soothsayers declared that it would never close until the most precious treasure of Rome had been thrown into it. It is said that a youth named Mettus, or Metius, Curtius, appeared on horseback in full armor, and before a very fair audience, exclaiming that Rome had no dearer possession than arms and courage, leaped down into the gulf, which thereupon closed over him. The incident, like most of the legendary history of Rome, has been subjected to severe criticism. Those who too hastily disbelieve in it will reconsider their opinion on reading the account, not previously published, of what took place at the bottom of the gulf. Curtius and the horse fell in the order in which they had started, with the horse underneath. After a few minutes' rapid passage, the horse stopped falling somewhat suddenly, broke most of itself, and died. Curtius, who, though a little shaken, was uninjured, sat up on his dead horse and looked round to see if he could discover the nearest way back. As he looked upward, he saw the top edges of the cavern close together, and the daylight shut out. But a curious greenish light still lingered in the cavern in which he found himself, and from one of its recesses came a voice which startled Mettus considerably. It said interrogatively, "Did you hurt yourself?" "Not much," replied Curtius. "I didn't know there was anybody down here. You have quite startled me. Do come out and let me see you." "No, thanks," said the voice. "Did you really believe that you would die when you jumped down the gulf?" "Certainly I did." The voice laughed, a mean little snigger. So you will, too. You'll die of suffocation, slowly, when the air in the cavern is exhausted. Then we'd better get to work at once, said Curtius. I have an excellent sword here and a couple of daggers. I put them on for the occasion. I didn't fall so far as I expected, and if we both of us work hard, we shall be able to cut our way out. Thanks, said the voice, but I'm not going to do any work. I'm not of the same kind as yourself. I don't need the air of the outer world. In fact, I don't think much of the outer world, even its best specimens. That's why I live down here. You've got to die. Sorry, but there's no help for it. I've set my trap, and I caught you, and if you're the best specimen they can provide on top, my low opinion of them is confirmed. What do you mean by the trap? Asked Curtis. Well, it was I who caused the chasm to open, knowing the kind of tomfool thing your soothsayers would remark about it. I sat here wondering what I should get. Shouldn't have been surprised at a brace of Vestal virgins. They would have exclaimed, "Purity and devotion," instead of "courage and arms," amid loud applause, of course. Or it might have been an elderly matron, with a good old tag that Rome held nothing more precious than the tender love of her mothers. It might have been a soothsayer. It might have been anything. As it is, it's you, and I think very little of you. Arms? Of what use do you think all these tin-pot arrangements which you have hung about you are likely to be? Courage? Why, man alive, you've got no courage at all. I have, said Curtius stolidly. I fully expected to die, and I was willing to die. Just for one moment, said the voice, when you had got all that mob of howling fools around applauding you. Applause is an intoxicant, and you got drunk on it. Now you are sober again, and you don't want to die at all. The man who can die alone, slowly and terribly, is courageous, but you've got no more courage in you than a piece of chewed string. You're as white as chalk. That's the effect of the green light, interposed Curtius. Rubbish, replied the voice. Green light doesn't make a man shake all over, does it? That's just the shock from the fall, said Curtius. But I can't stop here arguing with you. I'm off to explore the cavern. There must be a way out somewhere. There isn't, said the voice, but you can explore. I can't die like a rat in a trap, said Curtius, whimpering. And off he went on his exploration. He looked in at the recess from which the voice had proceeded and found nothing. The cave was enormous. For many hours he tramped on, and never through one tiny chink in the roof did he see the light of day. Exhausted and ravenous, at last he flung himself down on the floor of the cave, and almost immediately the voice, which had been silent all the time, began again. First of all came that faint, mean little snigger. Then it said, Hungry? Worn out with hunger, sobbed Curtius. I'm thirsty, too. My mouth is so parched that I can hardly speak, and there doesn't seem to be one drop of moisture in this damned cavern. There isn't, said the voice, nor one crumb of food either, with the exception of your horse, and I don't think you'll be able to find that again. You can try back if you like. Now I come to think of it, you won't die of suffocation, but of starvation. Cuts my entertainment rather shorter than I had hoped, but I must put up with that. I can't die like this, sobbed Curtius. Courage and arms, replied the voice, are the things which Rome holds most precious. Go on, my boy, you'll last some time yet. Then Curtius drew his sword, and went to look for the proprietor of the voice in order to slay him. But he didn't find him. He resumed his explorations. In a few hours he was too weak to walk any further. He fell into a kind of doze, and when he woke again his arms had been taken from him. "Where's my sword?" he exclaimed. "I've got it," replied the voice, this time from the roof of the cavern. "What do you want it for?" "Want to kill myself," said Curtius. "If I give you your sword, will you own that you were merely a drunken theatrical impostor?" "Yes." "And that you are a coward and are dying the death of a coward?" "Yes." The sword clattered down from the roof onto the floor of the cavern at the feet of the hero. He picked it up and set his teeth. The end of a show. It was a little village in the extreme north of Yorkshire, 3 miles from a railway station on a small branch line. It was not a progressive village. It just kept still and respected itself. The hills lay all round it and seemed to shut it out from the rest of the world. Yet folks were born and lived and died, much as in the more important centres, and there were intervals which required to be filled with amusement. Entertainments were given by amateurs from time to time in the schoolroom. Sometimes handbell ringers or a conjurer would visit the place, but their reception was not always encouraging. "Conjurers is nowt, and ringers is nowt," said the sad native judiciously. "I don't regard 'em." But the native brightened up when, in the summer months, a few caravans found their way to a piece of wasteland adjoining the churchyard. They formed the village fair, and for 2 days they were a popular resort. But it was understood that the fair had not the glories of old days. It had dwindled. Most things in connection with this village dwindled. The first day of the fair was drawing to a close. It was 10:30 at night, and at 11 the fair would close until the following morning. This last half hour was fruitful in business. The steam roundabout was crowded. The proprietor of the peep show was taking pennies very fast, although not so fast as the proprietor of another, somewhat repulsive show. A fair number patronized a canvas booth which bore the following inscription: "Popular Science Lectures. Admission free." At one end of this tent was a table covered with red baize. On it were bottles and boxes, a human skull, a retort, a large book, and some bundles of dried herbs. Behind it was the lecturer, an old man, grey and thin, wearing a bright-coloured dressing gown. He lectured volubly and enthusiastically. His energy and the atmosphere of the tent made it very hot, and occasionally he mopped his forehead. "I am about to exhibit to you," he said, speaking clearly and correctly, "a secret known to few, and believed to have come originally from those wise men of the East referred to in Holy Writ." Here he filled 2 test tubes with water, and placed some bluish-green crystals in one and some yellow crystals in the other. He went on talking, quoting scraps of Latin, telling stories, making local and personal allusions, finally coming back again to his 2 test tubes, both of which now contained almost colourless solutions. He poured them both together into a flat glass vessel, and the mixture at once turned to a deep brownish purple. He threw a fragment of something onto the surface of the mixture, and that fragment at once caught fire. This favourite trick succeeded. The audience were undoubtedly impressed, and before they quite realized by what logical connection the old man had arrived at the subject, he was talking to them about the abdomen. He seemed to know the most unspeakable and intimate things about the abdomen. He had made pills which suited its peculiar needs, which he could and would sell in boxes at 6 and 1 shilling, according to size. He sold 4 boxes at once, and was back in his classical and anecdotal stage, when a woman pressed forward. She was a very poor woman. Could she have a box of these pills at half price? Her son was bad, very bad. It would be a kindness. He interrupted her in a dry, distinct voice. "Woman, I never yet did anyone a kindness, not even myself." However, a friend pushed some money into her hand, and she bought 2 boxes. It was past 12 o'clock now. The flaring lights were out in the little group of caravans on the waste ground. The tired proprietors of the shows were asleep. The gravestones in the churchyard were glimmering white in the bright moonlight. But at the entrance to that little canvas booth, the quack doctor sat on one of his boxes, smoking a clay pipe. He had taken off the dressing gown and was in his shirt sleeves. His clothes were black, much worn. His attention was arrested. He thought that he heard the sound of someone sobbing. "It's a God-forsaken world," he said aloud. After a second silence, he spoke again. "No, I never did a kindness even to myself, though I thought I did, or I shouldn't have come to this." He took his pipe from his mouth and spat. Once more he heard that strange wailing sound. This time he arose and walked in the direction of it. Yes, that was it. It came from that caravan standing alone where the trees made a dark spot. The caravan was gaudily painted, and there were steps from the door to the ground. He remembered having noticed it once during the day. It was evident that someone inside was in trouble, great trouble. The old man knocked gently at the door. "Who's there? What's the matter?" "Nothing," said a broken voice from within. "Are you a woman?" There was a fearful laugh. "Neither man nor woman. A show." "What do you mean?" "Go round the side, and you'll see." The old man went round, and by the light of 2 wax matches caught a glimpse of part of the rough painting on the side of the caravan. The matches dropped from his hand. He came back and sat down on the steps of the caravan. "You're not like that," he said. "No, worse. I'm not dressed in pretty clothes and lying on a crimson velvet couch. I'm half naked in a corner of this cursed box, and crying because my owner beat me. Now go, or I'll open the door and show myself to you as I am now. It would frighten you. It would haunt your sleep. Nothing frightens me. I was a fool once, but I have never been frightened. What right has this owner over you?" "He is my father," the voice screamed loudly, and then there was more weeping. Then it spoke again. "It's awful. I could bear anything now, anything, if I thought it would ever be any better, but it won't. My mind's a woman's, and my wants are a woman's, but I am not a woman. I am a show. The brutes stand round me, talk to me, touch me." "There's a way out," said the old man quietly, after a pause. An idea had occurred to him. "I know, and I daren't take it. I've got a thing here, but I daren't use it." "You could drink something that wouldn't hurt?" "Yes." "You are quite alone?" "Yes, my owner is in the village at the inn." "Then wait a minute." The old man hastened back to the canvas booth and fumbled about with his chemicals. He murmured something about doing someone a kindness at last. Then he returned to the caravan with a glass of colorless liquid in his hand. "Open the door and take it," he said. The door was opened a very little way. A thin hand was thrust out and took the glass eagerly. The door closed, and the voice spoke again. "It will be easy?" "Yes." "Goodbye, then. To your health." The old man heard the glass crash on the wooden floor. Then he went back to his seat in front of the booth and carefully lit another pipe. "I will not go," he said aloud. "I fear nothing, not even the results of my best action." He listened attentively. No sound whatever came from the caravan. All was still. Far away the sky was growing lighter with the dawn of a fine summer day. that's the end. Very short stories. Also different. They're strange. That's interesting. I know there've been other short stories and also a Twilight Zone episode with the notion of like a call from beyond the grave. But I wonder if this was the first instance of it. I don't know of any earlier than like 1901. I think of the ones tonight, my favorite was either the one about the Case of Vincent Pyrwhit or the Bottom of the Gulf. But I don't think either one of them tops the Moonslave from last time. Let's see who else is here. Oh, you're playing Silent Hill 2, and then oh, trying to see what you could skip Thanatos and use. Oh, really? The store you went to had some Bragg's apple cider vinegar. Oh, but it had honey in it. Yeah. No, they sell that apple cider vinegar at a lot of stores. I just don't know if they sell the refreshers, which you can drink straight out of the bottle. And hey, Asmodon, how are you doing? I was lurking a bit for your birthday stream, but happy belated birthday. Seemed like it was going well. You guys, please go check out Asmodon. And hey, Zatara, welcome in. How are you tonight? Yeah, agreed, Thanatos. That got pretty dark at the end. In that last story especially. But, well, 2 stories that involve pointless murder and 2 stories that involve suicide. Yeah. Things were pretty dark back in the turn of the century, the turn of the previous century. Wouldn't have expected that. Oh, prepping some late night stew. Sounds delicious, Zatara. And hey, Niftiness, thank you. I appreciate it. You guys, please go check out Niftiness as well. Just you more marbles? Oh, just chatting. Nice. Yeah, I realize it's a really short stream tonight, but it's those things where it's an awkward length, because yeah, there are only 2 stories left, and how long is the book? Okay, the book's like 90 pages, and we're at 110, or 190 pages, and we're at 110. But you know, some of these stories have been 25 pages, but the next story is 66 pages. What the heck? I wonder if this was when these were first published, or if they'd been previously printed in magazines and papers and whatnot. I don't know much about Barry Payne at all. Like, he's one of those, people who wrote a lot, but isn't that well known anymore. Surprising how prolific some writers were. Like, you'll go to the library and book sale and be like, oh, the collected works of so-and-so in 10 volumes. I'm like, damn. Imagine being able to write that much in your life. Especially the people who did it before typewriters. Oh, watching Tales from the Crypt tonight. You mean the old TV show? It's funny, I liked the comics. It had a weird kind of dark humor to them, but I never got into the TV show as much, even that had plenty of dark humor. But I really liked the old Tales from the Crypt movie, the Amicus one. Amicus had a lot of great ones. God, I was like 14 when I saw that. We managed to find a VHS that the local store was selling when they closed down. I was so excited. It was a good movie. Oh yeah, before numbing their pain with drugs, and life. A lot of ways, life was not fun back then. Oh, you have a book of old Russian ghost stories. I don't know that I've read many Russian ghost stories at all. Are they interesting, Thanatos? Oh, yeah, the TV show from like the 80s. Surprisingly sexual and violent, but I think it must have been on cable. Yeah. The things you could get away with on cable then, and there's nothing compared to what you can get away with on streamers now. Yeah, they made a couple movies based on that TV show too. Haven't seen any of them. And they had the cartoon too, which I saw a couple of episodes of when I was a kid. The cartoon was pretty good. Let's see, what time is it? Oh, wow, yeah. Very short stream. I try not to do too many short streams, but I feel like a lot of my streams have been shorter than they used to be, but... Well, I don't know. Short Horror Saturday was, what, almost 4 hours? It's interesting how ghost stories from different countries have, yes, different styles and different presentation of the ghosts. Like older traditional ones. So more recent ones sometimes. So many good ghost stories I've read. I started reading them when I was a kid. Well, okay, since it's not that late, maybe I should get a little more work done tonight. And also... yeah. I also probably should get more rest, but... no. Should probably... compare these two drafts of a stupid document for work. It's gonna be a headache. The Mirror by Valery Bryusov. Oh, was it a good one, Thanatos? I mean, there have been several good horror stories about mirrors. It's a really good segment in Dead of Night. There's one from one of those Amicus ones. Oh yeah, of course I've been known to write short stories that involve mirrors myself. What was that movie, Mirror, Mirror, from like the 80s? That was a pretty good one, if I recall. Okay, I'm going to start looking roundabouts for a raid target. Start planning. Yeah, well. Oh, cool. You used to do audiobook streams too. Or Thanatos, or like you would read one story and then play a game in the same stream. Neat. The only times I've mixed it up like that is when I do my Halloween specials. But I know it's harder to remember what you've read afterwards. It's like a variation, yeah. Well, I guess it's streamer brain, just like for games, but with books. Oh, Breeze is online. How'd they ever get to raid him? He's not... Let's check whether he's ending soon. He's playing Control. I've never heard of that one. I've seen people playing it before. Ooh, it's got reel-to-reel tape players in it. That's fun. To be fair, so does our basement. As for what's coming up on stream, what I think I'm going to do is tomorrow... I'm going to mix it up. I know I'd been streaming Alone in the Dark and the New Nightmare on Wednesdays, but I feel like, because I'm tired on Wednesdays, and that game requires a lot of work as well as, or mental work as well as dexterity. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue Shadow's Price of Our Sins tomorrow, which is pretty good. I feel like that's one of the, it looks like it's shaping up to be kind of a, kind of weird story. I always like that. I don't know if it's my favorite of the straight horror hidden object games we've played. I guess not that there've been that many straight horror ones. So I think I'll continue that tomorrow. Then Saturday, for Short Horror Saturday, I'll either do a listening party of horror, or we'll play a trilogy of short Halloween-themed games that I found on Itch. And then Sunday, it'll be Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. Oh yeah, that's the plan. And then sometime in the next couple weeks, I'll do another bonus stream to finish up Stories in the Dark. And then we can move on to another horror audiobook. Since this one is, a 3-stream kind of book. There. But thank you guys again for coming to hang out and listening to dark and unsettling and sometimes depressing stories from the 19-aughts by Barry Payne. And I appreciate all the chatters and all the lurkers. And you guys can find me on Twitter and MySpace, where I post stream announcements and polls and random thoughts. And you can find VODs of my past streams up on YouTube. So I hope that everybody has a good night, receives no phone calls from sources that they don't recognize, doesn't jump into any chasms in Roman fountains. Good night, Thanatos. Good night, Zatara. Good night, everybody else. See you guys here tomorrow for some hidden object horror fun, and please say hi to Breeza Studios. Oh, thanks.